Well, I'm certainly open to adjusting them, but I'm not sure that the guilds are open to being adjusted. We've gone through that once before in the past when we went from 40-man raids down to 25-person raids, and that was certainly difficult for some guilds because there were people that they ended up having to tell, I'm sorry, you can't raid with us anymore. But we think it would be actually even more difficult if, for example, let's say we went to 15-person raids. It'd be very difficult to ask the 10-person guilds out there to find another 5 people to be able to continue raiding. So even though, if I went back in time, I might pick 15-person raids as the right size. I don't think that's the right thing to change today.
I think that's the beauty of Flex, right? That's really what Flex can bring to the game, is that there doesn't have to be a predetermined perfect size. People can bring the amount of people that they want and then have the raid change to the difficulty that fits for them.
Not really into heroic. We think that the next logical extension of the concept is normal difficulty. So, obviously the flex difficulty will learn a lot from that and how to tune the encounters for that kind of, flexibility. And if that works well, then hopefully we can get normal to be more flexible. I'm not sure that we would ever get the heroic to be flexible like that because the tuning has to be so tight that I think it would be extremely difficult to be able to get the same quality of tuning on every encounter. I really think that ultimately you would end up, you'd have the strategy saying on this boss you want 12 people with, this setup, and then on this boss you want 19, and then, kick 5 people out of the raid for the next boss, and that would feel terrible. We'll see. It was just kind of a one-off thing that our creative development department did. And, if it's something the players are really interested in seeing more of for the future kind of storyline stuff, then maybe.
I think we've been happy with the reception. It seems to be very popular with the players, so that part's great.
Well,
I think that there's a lot of things about the farm that we really liked that we would definitely want to develop on more moving into the next expansion. That's definitely a feature set we think that can grow. I don't know if it's necessarily always going to be related to daily quests. We like daily quests in a lot of ways, but I think we've learned a lot from trying to create so many that people felt like they had to do all of them. We've learned some lessons there, and I think you'll see that with Timeless Isle in patch 5.4. It's got almost no daily quests. It's got a few quests to help guide you around the island, but it's really more about exploration and discovery. And those are hopefully concepts that you'll see us carry forward into the next expansion in new ways.
But we definitely love the way that the farm felt like you could own a little piece of Azeroth.
Yep.
And we definitely expect to take that concept and be able to do more with that in the future. Definitely. I feel like it was very important to us to really build the Garrosh character over the last, year and a half to 2 years. We've known since the beginning of Mists of Pandaria development that we wanted Garrosh to kind of be the final end boss, but, you couldn't get there overnight. We had to make sure that it felt like a natural, progressive development to that point, and we're pretty happy with how that's played out.
We wanted to make sure that when people killed him, they fight him in the raid, that they feel like they know why.
Yeah.
They want to take him out for a reason, not just because he has loot, but because they know, everything that he's done and it fits the story.
Into a random LFR, yes.
Oh, I see.
Yes. In fact, we had been working on getting that into patch 5.4, and part of me wants to say that you actually can in 5.4.
I don't think that actually made it into the testing cycle. We talked about it quite a bit.
Yeah, and actually work was done on it, but I think it may not have made it in time.
I don't think it did.
But it's definitely something that we've been working on.
Yep.
And you see us carrying that forward into the Warforged concept. I feel like it's like there's a lot of desire for 25-man raiders to feel like there's a little bit more incentive to continue to do the 25-man raids because, it's certainly more organizationally difficult And so, but we have to ride that fine line of making it not feel like mandatory, right? That oh, well, if you're not doing 25-person raid, then you're second class. So I think the Thunderforge concept did that pretty well. I don't really see us going much farther with that. Pretty happy with how that played out. Right. Well,
we have a patch that will be the last raid content patch, is patch 5.4, but we do have one other patch planned before the expansion comes out that would help bridge the storyline between Mists of Pandaria and whatever the new expansion ends up being. We don't know the timeline on when exactly that would be, or the exact number, 5.5 or 5.9 or whatever. But it will definitely have something in there between that cycle, to help players kind of transition.
If it works well, then yes.
It's a trial case.
If it ends up being a terrible disaster, then maybe not.
It's exciting to see what happens with that. I think World PvP is something that we love, but we often struggle with. How can we get it in the game in a way where, it doesn't break certain things, and it doesn't, it's always a struggle to get it in a way that feels right. So that's going to be a good, interesting test to see how people, adapt to it. Yep.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll learn some things from the Timeless Isle that, we might be able to take that concept and refine some of the ideas. Yeah, that would be a very natural extension. That's probably one of our highest priorities for the in-game store, is to get those mounts and pets, and eventually maybe services like character transfer, things like that, into the game. We feel like that'd just be a better user experience rather than having to go to the website, log in there, and do your stuff, and go back onto the client. It's possible. I could see us extending the challenge mode concept into raids. I do think that I would love to find ways to get more players to participate in the challenge modes first. I think the challenge modes are a lot of fun, and they're a really cool concept. We're riding that fine line of how much we motivate people to do it. Right now it's obviously only cosmetic rewards, and I think it's very dangerous to put power rewards on there. There might be a way to do it that still feels optional, so that it doesn't feel like a progression blocker to players that aren't really able to get gold medal in a challenge mode or anything like that. But I think they work really well as a concept, and I could see doing, like, we've done challenge mode competitions and things like that, and I could see doing more of that. Whether or not it turns into a full-blown esport, I'm not sure. I think a lot of the success of Arenas and Burning Crusade was because it was very new, right? And it was a new thing, and people wanted to try it out and see what it was like. Certainly the class balance now is arguably a lot better than it was during Burning Crusade. But so I don't think it's really a balance issue. I think that in a lot of ways, World of Warcraft PvP is very difficult to watch. It's very difficult to know what's going on. And so I think more than anything else, that's what limits it as an esport. Granted, the balance issues limit it also, but if it were a great spectator experience, then I think that the balance issues wouldn't actually be all that significant, and it would be able to be a successful esport. But we're so far away from being able to make it a great spectator experience. We've never really designed the game for it to be easy to watch and understand what's going on when you're watching.
It moves so fast.
It goes so fast, and yeah, and that's a solvable problem. But I feel like there's so much happening on the screen, and so much of it is subtle, right? That things like knowing that this guy over here is casting a spell, and that this guy counterspelled that guy. When there's no visual connection for that whatsoever, is very difficult. Well, it is changed for Flex Raid.
For Flex Raid, you can do that.
Yeah. Right. We're not sure. It's possible, but we want to make sure that we don't completely break down the reason to be in a guild together. So we're very nervous about how far we go with that and eliminate the reasons to be on the same server in the same guild, because we feel like that creates a kind of a tighter social experience. So maybe, but not really currently planning to do it. What do you think about that, Corey?
I don't think that's exactly going to be the case. I think, part of the core of Warcraft, right, is for us to create that tension between Alliance and Horde, and I think we're going to want to do that even more carrying forward into the next expansion. I mean, obviously, we'll resolve some issues that have been hanging, through the expansion. There'll be a cinematic that the players will be able to see once they finally defeat Garrosh. But no, I think we'll want to keep those tensions strong. I feel like that's really a core part of the game.
Yeah, nobody wants World of Peacecraft.
No.
Not always. And honestly, we're never really the ones that predict that.
Yeah,
we
it's
don't
hard to
actually
tell
plan
right now.
that in advance and say this boss is going to be harder and that one's going to be easier. We try to have a fairly smooth difficulty curve in terms of having the progression of difficulty lead up to the end boss, and we usually shoot for the end boss feeling the most difficult. It just doesn't always work out that way. So we're trying for that, but I wouldn't be surprised if there are some peaks and valleys in the difficulty along the way.
No matter how many times we test stuff internally, when it goes out to the public, they somehow always find a way to do something in a different way.
Yeah.
So it's always hard to tell.
Yeah. And even at that point, it a lot of times it doesn't really make sense to change it significantly, right? Because it's okay for there to be some ups and downs. In fact, that can be argued as being good. Only if you really feel like the end boss is way too easy while we're testing, then for sure we make it harder. But it's pretty rare that we will redesign an entire encounter somewhere in the middle of the raid because we found out that it was harder than we expected it to be, or easier, or whatever. Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, transmogrification already does encourage people to do it, but we would like to make that a better experience. Rather than just going back and soloing it, it would be really cool to be able to use like the raid finder to do older raids and be kind of scaled in your power appropriately. I would love to see that, and it's something that pretty much the whole team would like to do. It's really just a question of when we can make it happen.
Finding the time to implement it is really the biggest problem there.
And then also finding the right way to reward it, because once you can actually queue for it and go in there, you start to have an expectation that you're going to get something out of it. And maybe beyond just the transmog, because if you're just going for the transmog, then why not just go do it solo, right? And so that really opens up a lot of questions about, well, what's the right thing to reward for it that feels good but doesn't feel like it's competing with the current raids, but isn't a waste of time and all that. Yeah.
I mean, those achievements are I think those are really cool. A lot of our players love those. It really just comes down to making sure that we have something that's going to feel like it fits the kit, right? We don't want to kind of jam something new in there just to do it, to try to get people to do something they've done before. So it's got to come down to the kit. Like maybe there'll be a reason in the story where we can kind of motivate people to do that again, where it feels right.
I could definitely see us updating the current achievement to fight the new war chief. Right.
That's one of the core reasons behind the legendary line that you've seen through Mists of Pandaria, why it ends, and you can get it at the beginning of patch 5.4, so it'll be useful to you during the current cycle, instead of getting that item and you've already, you finished the raid, and like you said, that it ends up being something that it looks kind of cool, but it's never actually useful. So I mean, that was one of our core reasons for changing that here, to change that up. As far as ones that already exist, I mean, that's definitely an interesting concept.
I mean, I could
something that
imagine if we do what we were talking about earlier and make the old raids available, I could see giving players some way to make those items useful. I'm sure we wouldn't go as far as to make them like as overpowered as they were when they first came out, but it'd be cool to see them be useful.
Yeah.